I think so. If I'm not wrong, that's a newly nascent kiliocosm domain. Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura exchanged a look with each other. Their eyes filled with shock. Even their breathing quickened. It was enough to show how unsettled the two of them were. Originally, the two of them only thought that perhaps Supremacy Resplendence had gone to a new kiliocosm domain, or joined a faction to fight on the battlefield, which was how he accumulated so many worlds. This was the case for Supremacy Fura and Supremacy Linfeng. They had improved a lot in the Dark Domain kiliocosm. However, they did not expect Supremacy Resplendence opportunity to be far greater than they had imagined. Could even be considered incredible and unbelievable. What did a nascent kiliocosm domain mean? This meant a huge opportunity. How many worlds were there in a kiliocosm domain? Actually, it was hard to say. There could be as many as hundreds of thousands or even millions of worlds, or as few as thousands. In a nascent kiliocosm domain, there were no celestial devils or other powerful controllers. This meant that they could take all the worlds for themselves. What kind of opportunity was this? In fact, if there were enough worlds, it was possible for them to become a great one-star supremacy in one leap. That's not right. If you found a nascent kiliocosm domain, how can you only have 13 worlds? Lin Feng raised his brows, and his gaze turned sharp. This? Supremacy Resplendence smiled weakly and said, I also know that this is a huge opportunity. It's just that that nascent kiliocosm domain is a little special. Staying there for a long time is actually not very meaningful. You've never seen a nascent kiliocosm domain before, so you naturally don't know what it's like. There's nothing inside. Worlds might be born, but the speed at which worlds are born is very slow, and time is very long. I also waited for a long time before finding 13 nascent worlds and devouring them. Originally, I wanted to wait for a period of time before going to that kiliocosm domain again. Perhaps more worlds would be born then. This is also why I said that I could give Supremacy Fura 5 worlds. Supremacy Resplendence talked about everything in detail without concealing anything. I see. Lin Feng nodded. He knew that Supremacy Resplendence was not lying. Only this could explain why Supremacy Resplendence had returned to the Wonder Domain. After all, a nascent kiliocosm domain was too boring. Even a controller supremacy with an internal universe would find it a little difficult to stay in the same place for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. Of course, Supremacy Resplendence wanted to return to the Wonder Domain and expand his harem properly. He even expanded his ambitions and had designs on Supremacy Fura, but in the end, he wound up inviting today's disaster for himself. How long have you been back in the Wonder Domain? About a few hundred years. A few hundred years? If we're lucky, perhaps some worlds have already been formed in that nascent kiliocosm domain. Look at Supremacy Resplendence. Originally, he was only a controller of 1 or 2 worlds, and his strength was not worth mentioning. However, just by discovering a newly developed kiliocosm domain, he had become a powerful supremacy with the combat power of more than 10 worlds in a single leap. Supremacy Fura? What do you think? Lin Feng looked at Supremacy Fura. Let's go take a look. Supremacy Fula was also very tempted. Who wouldn't want to take a look at such an opportunity? Supremacy Resplendence, you should know your current situation. Take us to that nascent kiliocosm domain. Lin Feng waved his hand and stashed Supremacy Resplendence into his internal universe. Go! There was no time to lose. Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura immediately left the marine world and flew out of the Wonder Domain. Along the way, Supremacy Fura hesitated. There was even a faint trace of worry in her eyes. With Lin Feng's understanding of Supremacy Fura, he naturally knew what she was worried about. It was a nascent kiliocosm domain, and the worlds inside were all unclaimed worlds. How great an opportunity was this? Faced with such a huge opportunity, who could stay true to themselves? Supremacy Fura was only a controller of 5 worlds. Compared to Lin Feng, she was far inferior. If Lin Feng had any ulterior motives and wanted to monopolize this opportunity, Supremacy Fura would not be able to resist at all. Supremacy Fula, don't worry. It's just a nascent kiliocosm domain. It's not enough for me to violate my principles. My principles are not something that a mere kiliocosm domain and some unclaimed worlds can shake. Supremacy Lin Feng. Supremacy Fura was slightly stunned, then looked at Lin Feng gratefully. Lin Feng only had the combat power of a few dozen worlds at the moment, and seemed to be much inferior to those celestial devil kings, celestial devils emperors, one-star supremacies, and so on. They were not on the same level at all, but Lin Feng's character had long surpassed those powerful entities. He did not even take a kiliocosm domain seriously, yet from him such words were actually convincing. Only at this moment did Supremacy Fura understand how great the spirit in Lin Feng's heart was. To her, becoming a one-star supremacy might already be her ultimate goal. However, to Lin Feng, his goal had never been becoming a one-star supremacy. Instead, it was those great and powerful kiliocosm sovereigns, and even far beyond kiliocosm sovereigns. Hence, Lin Feng did not mind Supremacy Fura tagging along for this huge opportunity. Supremacy Fula was completely at ease now. Their traveling speed became much faster. Following Supremacy Resplendent's guidance, Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura passed through one kiliocosm domain corridor after another, and finally arrived at a very remote place. The entire small kiliocosm was simply too vast. There were simply too many kiliocosm domains. Some remote places could not be found at all. This remote place was the same. It was very far from the nearest realm. Moreover, that kiliocosm domain was a dead kiliocosm domain without any value. Who would come to a dead kiliocosm domain? Where is the new kiliocosm domain? Lin Feng waved his hand and moved Supremacy Resplendence out. Therefore, I went to the swirl domain to take a look for myself. With that, I discovered a nascent kiliocosm domain, and it's in the swirl domain. Supremacy Resplendence pointed in the direction of the swirl domain ahead. The swirl domain? Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura rushed to the swirl domain in front of them immediately. From the outside, the swirling domain looked lifeless. Even the rules were gone. There were not even any special rules in the kiliocosm domain corridor. That meant that the kiliocosm domain was completely dead and worthless. Who would set foot in a worthless kiliocosm domain, which was in such a remote place at that? Even though Supremacy Resplendence had sworn that there was a nascent kiliocosm domain here, Lin Feng was still a little suspicious. Others would be even less likely to think of it. It was too difficult to discover a new kiliocosm domain in the swirl domain. Let's go in and take a look. Without hesitation, Lin Feng immediately flew into the swirl domain. Swoosh! As soon as he flew into the swirl domain, Lin Feng sensed a new type of rules. This new type of rule seemed to be related to gravity. It was just that these gravity rules were incomparably daunting. Even a complete world would be suppressed. However, neither Lin Feng nor Supremacy Fura paid much attention to these gravity rules. What they were more concerned about was that a new type of rule had appeared here. The two of them knew very well what this meant. A new type of special rule meant that there was a complete kiliocosm domain here. The two of them continued to fly forward. Soon, they discovered a huge kiliocosm domain filled with vitality. It was real. There was a whole new kiliocosm domain filled with rich gravity rules. It's true. It's really a nascent kiliocosm domain. This is an opportunity. A huge opportunity. Supremacy Fura could not help but feel excited as well. Even her voice was trembling. Such an opportunity was not something that could be encountered easily. If there were enough worlds inside, it would not even be a problem for the two of them to become one-star supremacies. Of course, Supremacy Fura also knew that there might be many worlds inside, or there might be nothing. The formation of a kiliocosm domain required a long time. It also required a long time for a kiliocosm domain to give rise to a world. However, no matter what, this opportunity now belonged to her and Lin Feng. Let's go in. Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura entered this new kiliocosm domain that had just come into being. Buzz. As soon as he stepped in, Lin Feng sensed a terrifying gravity. It was 10 or even 100 times stronger than gravity rules he had sensed in the swirl domain previously. These terrifying gravity rules even made Lin Feng's figure a little unstable at once. However, The cosmic power in Lin Feng's body immediately spread throughout his entire body. Then, these gravity rules could not do anything to Lin Feng. No matter how powerful the gravity rules were, how could it affect a huge universe? It was the same for Supremacy Fura. With a slight turn of cosmic power, she stabilized herself. This little amount of gravity rules was not worth mentioning to a controller with a universe. Of course, it would probably be very difficult for anyone below the level of a controller to survive in such an environment. A whole new Kiliacosm domain. Supremacy Resplendence wasn't lying. It's just that there isn't a single world. It's too desolate. Supremacy Fura muttered softly. However, Lin Feng said with a smile, "How many worlds can there be in a Kiliacosm domain that has just been born?" Moreover, it had been plundered by Supremacy Resplendence previously. Now that hundreds of years have passed, many more worlds might have been born. Let's go around. To ordinary cultivators, centuries were insignificant. However, a Kiliacosm domain that had just been born was too massive. Anything could happen. In a few hundred years, perhaps some worlds might have been born in this Kiliacosm domain. Hence, Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura began to search through the entire Kiliacosm domain. As they searched, the two of them slowly analyzed the gravity rules of this Kiliacosm domain. Although analysis of the rules was very slow and took a long time, and was not quite worth it, the two of them were definitely going to be in this nascent Kiliacosm domain for a long time. It would naturally be very beneficial for them to adapt to the rules of this Kiliacosm domain faster. A world. A newborn world. Suddenly, Supremacy Fura stopped and looked at a huge world in front of her. Her voice was trembling, and she appeared very excited. In reality, they had only been in the Kiliacosm domain for a month or two, but they had actually already obtained a world. How could she not be excited? Supremacy Fura, you were the first to discover this world. Go ahead and devour it, Lin Feng said calmly. Huh? Me? That's... Supremacy Fura was a little hesitant. She knew that Lin Feng had not actually discovered this world later than her. I have enough worlds. It's fine. Moreover, it's the first world. What if something goes wrong? You have to take some risks too. Lin Feng still stood his ground. Supremacy Fura hesitated for a moment, but agreed in the end. However, she made an agreement with Lin Feng that he would have the worlds they discovered in the future, and Lin Feng agreed as well. Soon, Supremacy Fura flew to that world. Then, her internal universe descended. The huge internal universe instantly enveloped the new world. Lin Feng stared intently at Supremacy Fura and that new world. He did want to see if there would be any trouble in these worlds. If there was trouble, it would be too risky to rashly devour them into the internal universe. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Soon, Supremacy Fura opened her eyes. Supremacy Fura, how do you feel? Lin Feng hurriedly asked. Supremacy Fura smiled and said, There's no problem at all. It's just like devouring other worlds in the past. It's really wonderful. These worlds can be freely devoured. Hearing Supremacy Fura's affirmative answer, a smile also appeared on Lin Feng's face. Opportunity. This was truly a great opportunity. Hence, the two of them continued to search. In succession, they found 3 more worlds. The two of them each took half and each obtained 2 worlds. Lin Feng also devoured them all without any problems. Supremacy Fura, the two of us are too inefficient together. Why don't we split up and find our own worlds to devour? In any case, there doesn't seem to be any power in this Kiliacosm domain that can threaten us. Supremacy Fura nodded. It was indeed too slow for the two of them to search for worlds together. They might as well separate. However, the two of them still agreed not to be too far apart. If any accidents happened, they could still go and reinforce each other. Hence, the two of them separated and went to search for worlds independently. Currently, Lin Feng already had 20 worlds in his internal universe. There were only 18 worlds that were comparable to 3 ordinary worlds. Lin Feng could no longer nurture them. After all, there was not that much origin. However, whether there was origin was not important now. As long as he found enough worlds, what did it matter if there was no origin? Lin Feng used the Void Quake secret technique. He was extremely fast as he searched around for worlds. Seemed like his luck was not bad either. He encountered 5 nascent worlds in a row, and in a year, the number of worlds in his internal universe quickly expanded to 25. There were 25 worlds in his internal universe. At this moment, Lin Feng had the combat power of 61 worlds. His strength improved very quickly. This was an opportunity. As long as there was an opportunity, anyone could advance in a single leap. Originally, this opportunity was meant for Supremacy Resplendence, but Supremacy Resplendence failed to seize it, giving Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura a chance. Ever since he entered this Kiliacosm domain, Lin Feng had devoured a total of 7 worlds, all of which were nascent worlds. Lin Feng also vaguely developed a question. How were these worlds born? Lin Feng searched everywhere in this Kiliacosm domain. Many worlds he encountered had already taken shape. As for how worlds were born, he did not know either. Lin Feng was probably not the only one who did not know. Even those controllers might not know. Ordinary controllers used the boundary stone to establish an internal world. They only knew about the boundary stone, but they did not know much about how worlds were born. The other type of controllers became controllers by transforming into a universe like Lin Feng. However, Lin Feng also did not know how his internal universe was born, nor did he know the exact steps of its birth. For some reason, Lin Feng had a vague feeling that this seemed to be very important, even more important than devouring worlds. In the next period of time, Lin Feng consciously tried to find some worlds that were taking shape. Unfortunately, encountering such worlds also depended on luck. However, Lin Feng did not lack time. Even if he stayed here for hundreds or thousands of years, Lin Feng would not care. Hence, Lin Feng simply continued to search for worlds. Perhaps one day, he would encounter the world that was in the process of being formed. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. For a total of 10 years, Lin Feng constantly shuttled through this nascent Kiliacosm domain, constantly searching for worlds. In just 10 years, Lin Feng's internal worlds had actually reached 50 in number. There were a total of 50 worlds, which meant encountering 3 worlds on average every year. It did not seem like a lot, but one must keep in mind that there was an endless stream of worlds. Back then, Supremacy Resplendence had only stayed in this region for a short while before leaving. However, he had also obtained more than 10 worlds. Now that a few hundred years had passed, there were naturally more worlds. It was just a pity about this opportunity. Supremacy Resplendence originally wanted to wait for a while before coming again. Then, he would devour more than 100 worlds in one go, and become a hegemon of a region in one fell swoop. But now, all his plans had been ruined, and Lin Feng had benefited instead. I wonder how Supremacy Fura is doing. How many worlds has she devoured? Lin Feng could also sense Supremacy Fura, which meant that nothing had happened to her. Perhaps Supremacy Fura had also devoured dozens of worlds. Lin Feng had heard Supremacy Fura mention the Boundary Stone. The Boundary Stone that Supremacy Fura had obtained back then was not particularly brilliant, but it could accommodate 100 worlds without issues. As for more, she would have to think of another way. The Boundary Stone could not be replaced. It could only be tempered and fused. If she obtained a higher-grade Boundary Stone, it could be fused into the Boundary Stone of her internal universe. There was actually not much danger in this. It was just that the Boundary Stone had its limitations. However, Lin Feng did not have any limitations. If there were 10,000 worlds here, he could devour 10,000 worlds, and it would not be a problem for him to become a 1-star supremacy. Lin Feng's improvement was very great, and was not even slower than when he was in the dark domain Kiliacosm. Moreover, the improvement was sustainable. He could continue to devour worlds for 10 years, 100 years, or even 1,000 years. However, he still did not know how these worlds were born. If he could encounter the birth of a world, Lin Feng would be satisfied. That would be a true gain. Huh? That is. Lin Feng warped for another distance. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He saw a gray mist in front of him. It appeared as if it was wrapping something, and was filled with a terrifying power. Lin Feng frowned, but he did not act rashly. Instead, he waited quietly. This mist was filled with all kinds of rules. It was actually still beating slightly, like a heart. At this moment, Lin Feng even felt that it was somewhat similar to life. Boom! Suddenly, in the next moment, the gray mist exploded, and a violent tremor spread in all directions. A terrifying force swept towards Lin Feng, but with a casual wave of his hand, the shockwave dissipated without a trace. It was useless against Lin Feng. Lin Feng just had to mobilize a little cosmic power, and this meager shockwave would not be able to shake him. However, Lin Feng still stared intently at the sphere of mist in the distance. In particular, after the explosion, Lin Feng could clearly sense the appearance of a world membrane. At the same time, the rules of the world were vaguely intertwining and taking shape. Countless world rules gradually evolved into a complete world rule. The terrifying explosive power created a huge space, and there was also a membrane. This space was also rapidly evolving. As 1 month, 2 months, 3 months passed, Lin Feng watched here for a full year. He had also wasted a year. A year later, what appeared in front of Lin Feng was a world that had just been born, and had not even given rise to life. However, even if life had not been born, it was still a true world. It was only a matter of time before life was born. A world. This is the process of the birth of a world. Lin Feng kept recalling the process. He never would have thought that he would personally witness the birth of a world. And now, the scene of the birth of this world was vivid in his mind. Lin Feng would never forget it. It was practically engraved in his mind. At this point, even if no life form was born, this world had actually already taken shape. In the future, life would be born in the world, a civilization would be formed, and it would develop continuously. Tracing it back to the source, Lin Feng recalled that the mist at the beginning was beating like a human heart. Then, it exploded violently, finally forming a world. Lin Feng did not know what was in that gray mist. Looks like the key to forming a world lies in that gray mist. Since I can discover it once, I can discover it a second time. Lin Feng was very determined as he began searching again. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Another 5 years passed. Lin Feng's internal world increased by another 15, reaching 65. Of the 55 worlds, 18 of them were comparable to 54 ordinary worlds. Hence, Lin Feng now had the combat power of a total of 101 worlds. According to the standards of the celestial devils, such a terrifying combat power was that of a true celestial devil king. In addition, there were Lin Feng's various secret techniques, the chaotic lotus, and the uniqueness of his internal universe. Even compared to the 11th celestial devil king at his peak back then, Lin Feng was not to be outdone. The combat power of 100 worlds. Lin Feng was also a little surprised. Even though his cultivation speed was very fast, that was in the dark domain chiliocosm on the battlefield. Moreover, he took the path of nurturing, which was very troublesome. Who would have thought that after leaving the dark domain chiliocosm and the primordial lodge, he would encounter such an opportunity? The speed of improvement was even faster than when he was in the dark domain chiliocosm. The opportunities in life were incomparably miraculous. In retrospect, the dissolution of the primordial lodge did not seem to be that bad. Thud, thud, thud. Just as Lin Feng was getting emotional about the 100 worlds, his internal universe, and how his combat power was comparable to a celestial devil king now, he heard heartbeats again. Lin Feng looked at it with focus. Not far in front of him, a gray mist had appeared. It was constantly pulsating, as if a terrifying power was gradually on the verge of eruption. I've finally encountered it again. A world about to take shape, and now he had encountered it again. This time, Lin Feng did not hesitate. He mobilized the power of the internal universe, turning it into a huge palm that could hold up the sky, and grabbed out hard. Buzz. Lin Feng easily grabbed the sphere of mist. When he grabbed the sphere of mist, he felt a surging energy, as if it was about to break free from his restraints at any moment. However, Lin Feng had used the power of his internal universe. It was the power of a total of 65 worlds, and combat power equivalent to 101 worlds. Such a terrifying power could naturally suppress the restlessness in this mist. Let me take a closer look at the key to the formation of the world. Lin Feng gathered his mental power and pierced through the mist forcefully to look at the core inside. Boom! In an instant, Lin Feng felt as if even his mind had blown slightly. He saw that it was a strange aggregation of rules. It was filled with gravity rules, the gravity rules of this kiliocosm domain. However, when these gravity rules were gathered, they vaguely underwent some strange change, causing them to be constantly irritated. Like a heart, there was a faint power spewing out that was about to erupt. I see. After careful investigation, Lin Feng understood. The gravity rules would constantly converge and erupt. During this period of time, all kinds of changes would occur, forming a world. Of course, if the world was to take shape, the changes produced would definitely be very complicated and tedious. Even Lin Feng could not perfectly control every step. Moreover, apart from the convergence of rules, there was another most important thing, and that was what carried these rules. Lin Feng's mental power continued to extend. Through the layers of gravity rules, he saw a round and flawless stone at the core. That's right, it was like a stone, but it was round and flawless, filled with a strange sense of beauty. Even though it was only the size of a wash basin, such a tiny stone could accommodate such massive gravity rules. Eventually, it would explode, forming a world. Perhaps the stone would shatter the moment it exploded, but without a doubt, it had established the foundation of a world. After seeing the true appearance of this stone, Lin Feng was incomparably excited, because he had already recognized this stone. The boundary stone. Lin Feng was certain that this was the boundary stone. Even though Lin Feng had never seen the boundary stone, he had seen too many descriptions of the boundary stone. To a controller, the boundary stone was the most important thing. Even a controller who had never seen the boundary stone could recognize it at a glance. The greatest characteristic of the boundary stone was that it could accommodate rules. Otherwise, if it could not even accommodate rules, how could it accommodate the entire world? Lin Feng understood now. He understood completely. The formation of these worlds was the convergence of the boundary stone and the rules. A chain reaction would eventually occur, forming a world. Of course, the used boundary stone could not be reused, because it was already damaged and had accommodated the rules of other controllers. Naturally, it could no longer accommodate other rules. Disperse. Lin Feng felt that the boundary stone in his hand was about to explode. It should be on the verge of explosion. Once it exploded, it would gradually form a new world. Lin Feng still wanted to study the boundary stone more, so he dispersed all the gravity rules attached to the boundary stone. Only then was the true appearance of the boundary stone revealed. This boundary stone was not large. According to Lin Feng's understanding of boundary stones, this should only be the most basic boundary stone. If a controller obtained it and used it to open up an internal world, it could only accommodate a few worlds at most. High-quality boundary stones were not so easy to obtain, and were extremely precious. However, ordinary boundary stones, such as the boundary stone that could only accommodate a few worlds, basically wouldn't be used to open up internal worlds by anyone. Even if someone uses it for such a purpose, it would only be a temporary measure. In the future, they would have to find a higher quality boundary stone to replace it. However, no matter how low quality the boundary stone was, it was still a boundary stone. How miraculous! How were these boundary stones formed? Lin Feng thought about it carefully. The boundary stone seemed to appear often in kiliocosm domains, as if it was nurtured by kiliocosm domains. The higher the quality of the boundary stone, the more this was the case. But what about the boundary stones of those kiliocosm sovereigns? How did they find them? The internal worlds of those kiliocosm sovereigns were comparable to a small kiliocosm. How challenging was it to find a boundary stone of such a high quality? Lin Feng had also vaguely heard some rumors. It was rumored that a small kiliocosm would naturally produce a boundary stone, but a boundary stone that could accommodate a small kiliocosm, and it was very precious. Often, a small kiliocosm could only produce one or two high-quality boundary stones that could accommodate a small kiliocosm. This was enough to show how precious high-quality boundary stones were. However, Lin Feng frowned. Looking at the boundary stone in his hand, what was its use to Lin Feng? Lin Feng transformed into a universe by relying on his own power. He did not have a limit of accommodation at all, and could accommodate countless worlds. Hence, he did not need boundary stones. What use were these boundary stones to him? The boundary stone. If the legends are true, I can give it a try. A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. At this moment, he recalled a rumor circulating among the controllers. It was rumored that there was more to a boundary stone than establishing a world. It could also stabilize a world, making it unbreakable and indestructible. However, no one knew the exact method. Moreover, why would they not fuse the boundary stone if they got one? Those controllers who had often successfully replaced a low-quality boundary stone with a high-quality one would not fuse low-quality boundary stones with it, lest they degrade the quality of the boundary stone. They were usually used for trading. Boundary stones were very valuable. No matter how low-quality a boundary stone was, it could possibly give rise to a controller. Naturally, the price would be very high. It was just that rumors had it that the boundary stone could enhance the stability of the world. But how should it be used for such a purpose? As soon as he swept the boundary stone into his internal universe, the huge chaotic lotus that had not moved for a long time in Lin Feng's internal universe seemed to be in extreme desire at this moment. Countless roots stretching into the void were shaking, and even the entire universe was shaking. Lin Feng did not expect the chaotic lotus to have such a huge reaction to a single boundary stone. You want to devour the boundary stone? Lin Feng asked the chaotic lotus. He knew that the chaotic lotus had a certain degree of sentience, and could understand his words. The chaotic lotus shook continuously. It was clearly in extreme desire. This made Lin Feng a little hesitant instead. The core of his internal universe was actually the chaotic lotus. If anything could destroy the chaotic lotus, basically the entire universe would collapse. Lin Feng had always known this very well. Hence, Lin Feng still had some doubts about allowing the chaotic lotus to devour the boundary stone. However, seeing that the chaotic lotus was extremely eager, considering the state of the chaotic lotus, this boundary stone should not affect it much. Hence, Lin Feng did not stop it anymore. Swoosh! The countless roots of the chaotic lotus pierced forcefully into the boundary stone. Then, the boundary stone gradually turned into dust, and completely fused into the chaotic lotus. As the chaotic lotus continued to digest the boundary stone, Lin Feng also realized that the chaotic lotus was constantly growing. Roots stretched into the entire universe, causing the chaotic lotus to be even more closely connected to the universe. It even made the cosmic membrane stronger. This sturdiness had increased by at least 10%. This was already quite a lot. If more boundary stones were added continuously, would it be able to enhance the cosmic membrane by 2, 3, or even dozens or hundreds of times in the future? At that time, even if Lin Feng's number of internal worlds was fewer than the other controllers would not be able to do anything to Lin Feng's internal universe at all. Not bad, not bad. The boundary stone actually has such an effect. It fused with the chaotic lotus and caused such a change. Boundary. Could this be the true use of the boundary stone? Lin Feng did not know much, but there must be a meaning behind the name boundary stone. The internal universe was Lin Feng's foundation. Actually, Lin Feng was very fragile now. Once a powerful entity tore through his cosmic membrane, his internal universe would be unstable. Hence, strengthening the cosmic membrane of the internal universe and stabilizing the internal universe was Lin Feng's top priority at this moment. The boundary stone he obtained by chance undoubtedly gave Lin Feng a direction. However, boundary stones were too rare. Even in nascent chiliocosm domains, one might only be able to obtain some boundary stones by encountering those worlds that had yet to truly take shape. If possible, I can seek deals from other controllers in the future. Countless thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind. Although the boundary stones were very precious, there was still a market for it, and they could be purchased. However, the price to purchase boundary stones was very, very high. However, Something that could increase the stability of the internal world and make it indestructible was even more precious. Even certain defensive secret techniques, such as Lin Feng's membrane reinforcement secret technique, could only increase the defense by a little. They were not comparable to the effect of the boundary stone at all. Hence, Lin Feng still had to continue finding boundary stones. This nascent kiliocosm domain is really filled with treasures. Be it worlds or boundary stones, they are both things I urgently need. Lin Feng made up his mind and continued to search for worlds or boundary stones in the kiliocosm domain. A figure suddenly appeared outside the swirl domain. A man in a golden robe and a tall crown, with a pale, beardless face and a dignified aura all over, arrived outside the swirl domain. Another 1,000 years have passed. It's about time. There should be at least hundreds of worlds nurtured in the kiliocosm domain by now, right? I can harvest a batch now. A smile appeared on the man's lips. If a controller of the vast domain saw this at this moment, they would definitely be surprised. Wasn't this Supremacy Chendi, who had ascended rapidly to power in the vast domain in the past 2,000 years? Originally, Supremacy Chendi was only an ordinary controller in the vast domain. However, after obtaining an unknown opportunity, his strength advanced by leaps and bounds. In just 2,000 years, his internal universe had broken through to 300 worlds, and he had become an hegemon of a region, gaining a certain status even in the vast domain. The vast domain was currently being invaded by the celestial devils. Or rather, the controllers and the celestial devils were competing over the vast domain. A controller who ascended so rapidly naturally attracted great attention from the celestial devils. However, Supremacy Chendi had always stayed at the home front. Even if he appeared at the front line occasionally, he would not put himself in danger, and the celestial devils could do nothing about it. I hope I can gain more this time. If I do, I won't have to worry about my own safety anymore. I can even shine in vast domain and be renowned in it. At that time, I can take the opportunity to expand my faction. It's not impossible for me to devour the entire vast domain. A trace of fervor flashed across Supremacy Chendi's eyes. Ambition grew in his heart, and it grew larger and larger. His ultimate goal was even to become the hegemon of the vast domain. Not only did he want to expel the celestial devils, he also wanted to expel the other controllers. He wanted to be the only true hegemon of the vast domain and dominate it alone. This was simply insane, but Supremacy Chendi naturally had reason to be confident. This was because he had found a nascent kiliocosm domain. In this kiliocosm domain, countless worlds were slowly being born. This kiliocosm domain was the reason he could improve to this extent so quickly. He even found a high-quality boundary stone from it that could accommodate 1,000 worlds. At the very least, before he had acquired 1,000 internal worlds, he did not have to worry about reaching the limit of internal worlds. Moreover, as long as he continued to improve and stood out in the vast domain, becoming a hegemon of a region, it was not impossible for him to obtain a boundary stone of higher quality. However, Supremacy Chendi valued this nascent kiliocosm domain more. He had already perceived this kiliocosm domain as a kiliocosm domain that belonged solely to him. Swoosh! Supremacy Chendi flew into the swirl domain. Soon he saw the familiar domains. This domain still appeared empty and was filled with gravity rules everywhere. However, Supremacy Chendi liked this place very much. Only by returning here could he feel freedom, and could his heart be at peace. This was because only here did he feel that he could control the entire kiliocosm domain. He was the only ruler in the entire kiliocosm domain. This feeling of being the ruler of everything fascinated Supremacy Chendi deeply. The kiliocosm domain was empty. The familiar gravity rules made Supremacy Chendi incomparably excited. Then, he began to search the entire kiliocosm domain the same way he did before. As 1 month, 2 months, 3 months passed, after an entire year, Supremacy Chendi's expression gradually darkened. There's no formed worlds? 1,000 years have passed. How can worlds not have been formed? Could it be that I am too unlucky this time and haven't encountered any? Supremacy Chendi was very upset. He knew that the formation of worlds required time, so he had specially waited for 1,000 years. He would harvest worlds every 1,000 years. Like crops, he would only come to harvest them after a certain amount of time had passed for them to grow. But now he had not encountered a single world in a year. This could not help but make Supremacy Chendi a little upset. However, he did not think too much about it. He only felt that he might be a little unlucky, so he continued searching. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Over a total of 3 years, Supremacy Chendi had only found 3 worlds. On average, he only encountered 1 world a year. This was completely different from the previous 2 times. Something's wrong. It's impossible for there to be so few worlds. Gradually, Supremacy Chendi also sensed that something was amiss. Supremacy Chendi's expression was very dark. Thoughts flashed through his mind. It had been 3 years. Even if he was a little unlucky, it was impossible for there to be only 3 worlds. What exactly happened in this time made Supremacy Chendi furious deep down. Swoosh! Supremacy Chendi continued searching. However, he was no longer searching for worlds. Instead, he was searching for some clues. He suspected that someone had been to this Kiliakosm domain. Otherwise, how could there be so few worlds in the Kiliakosm domain? However, Supremacy Chendi was only suspicious and did not have direct evidence. In reality, the swirl domain was too huge. It was impossible to completely seal it. If he had set up some illusions, it would be even more indicative that something was here. Supremacy Chendi would not be so foolish. Fortunately, the swirl domain was a remote domain to begin with and also a dead domain. No one would go to the swirl domain, so the probability of discovering this nascent domain was naturally very small. Back then, Supremacy Chendi had entered the swirl domain to hide from his enemies. It was how he accidentally discovered this nascent Kiliakosm domain. Although this place was very concealed and not easy to discover, if Supremacy Chendi could discover it by accident, couldn't others come to the swirl domain by accident and discover it? Hence, Supremacy Chendi's expression was very dark. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that someone had really come to this Kiliakosm domain. Suddenly, Supremacy Chendi arrived in a void. He closed his eyes as if sensing something. Swoosh! Supremacy Chendi suddenly opened his eyes. An unfamiliar aura, and it's the aura of a controller. It hasn't completely dissipated yet. There should be a world here just now. The other party has just devoured the world and hasn't gone far. They're nearby. Supremacy Chendi's gaze was cold. He had found it. He had finally found traces of the other party. His guess was right. This Kiliakosm domain had indeed been discovered by others. Supremacy Chendi was enraged. In his opinion, this Kiliakosm domain already belonged to him completely. Anyone who entered this Kiliakosm domain privately was a thief who had stolen his belongings. They deserved to die. Who touched my worlds? Killing intent surged all over Supremacy Chendi's body. Following the trace of aura, he transformed into a stream of light and quickly chased after it. The 50th world. After devouring the world in front of her, Supremacy Fura's mood was already as calm as still waters. That was a total of 50 worlds. Before entering this new Kiliakosm domain, she had only had 5 worlds. But now it had increased by 45 worlds in an extremely short period of time, reaching half 100. This speed of improvement shocked even Supremacy Fula. This was an opportunity that could allow one to ascend to the top in a single step. Moreover, she had always taken the path of devouring. There were no hidden dangers at all. Her internal world was incomparably calm and stable, and there would be no hidden risks. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before she had 100 worlds. I wonder how many worlds Supremacy Lin Feng has obtained? He's stronger and faster. He must have encountered more worlds and gained more than me. Supremacy Fura muttered softly. Actually, she was very grateful to Lin Feng. She knew very well that Lin Feng could have monopolized this opportunity. But he had given her a chance. This favor was extraordinary. Although she did not say anything, she remembered it firmly in her heart. In the future, she would definitely find an opportunity to repay Lin Feng for this favor. However, she was also very glad that she had recognized Lin Feng's potential. Back then, She had befriended Lin Feng in the dark domain Kiliacosm. From the looks of it, her actions back in the dark domain Kiliacosm were very wise. There are fewer and fewer worlds. Perhaps we are about to sweep through all the worlds in this Kiliacosm domain. If we want to devour more worlds, we will have to wait for another few centuries. Recently, Supremacy Fura had also sensed that it was becoming harder and harder to encounter a complete world. After all, this was a nascent Kiliacosm domain. There were only so many worlds, and it still required time to slowly accumulate. Who is it? Who touched my worlds? Suddenly, a terrifying aura seemed to envelop the entire void. The mighty aura pressed down like a mountain, instantly suffocating Supremacy Fura. Supremacy Fura looked up in shock and saw a huge world in the distance. Boom! Supremacy Fura immediately manifested all her worlds. 50 worlds rose slowly, embedded behind Supremacy Fura like dazzling gems. 50 worlds were enough to disperse this terrifying pressure. But Supremacy Fura looked as if she was facing a formidable enemy, and did not relax at all. Who are you? Supremacy Fura asked in a low voice. In the void, a towering man in a tall crown and golden robe stood in the void, looking down from above, his eyes incomparably cold. You're the one who touched my worlds? I'm Supreme Chendi. Supreme Chendi? Supremacy Fura had never heard of it. After all, there were countless Kiliacosm domains in a small Kiliacosm. How could she have ever heard of every controller? However, the terrifying aura released by the other party still let Supremacy Fura know that this was a powerful controller supremacy. Even with 50 worlds, she would find it difficult to resist him. Lin Feng, Supremacy Lin Feng, we're in trouble. Someone unwelcome has arrived at this Kiliacosm domain. Supremacy Fura hurriedly transmitted the message. She could still sense Lin Feng, which meant that Lin Feng was not far from her. As long as she stalled for some time, she might be able to wait until Lin Feng arrived. Right now, the most important thing for Supremacy Fura was to stall. This Kiliacosm domain is a nascent Kiliacosm domain. There are countless worlds inside. We can each search for worlds ourselves. There's no need to fight to the death. Supremacy Fura's entire being was on guard. It would naturally be best if she could persuade this Supremacy Chendi in front of her to leave. There was no need to make a big fuss. Supremacy Chendi suddenly threw his head back and laughed aloud. Ha ha ha! What a joke! It's ridiculous to the extreme. You've only just discovered this Kiliacosm domain, while I've already discovered this Kiliacosm domain thousands of years ago. Everything in the Kiliacosm domain belongs to me, Supremacy Chendi. You're a thief who stole what belongs to me. Therefore, you deserve to die. Supremacy Chendi practically gritted his teeth, his entire body emitting a cold killing intent. You discovered the Kiliacosm domain first? Supremacy Fura's heart skipped a beat. Clearly, she had already realized the whole situation. It turned out that the first person to discover this Kiliacosm domain was probably this Supremacy Chendi in front of her. However, for some reason, Supremacy Resplendence accidentally discovered it later. However, neither Supremacy Resplendence nor Supremacy Chendi seemed to have discovered each other. When Supremacy Fura entered this Kiliacosm domain, she was finally discovered by Supremacy Chendi, who had also come to this Kiliacosm domain. In particular, Supremacy Chendi regarded this Kiliacosm domain as his own. Of course, he could not tolerate other controllers stealing his worlds. Supremacy Fura was in a very dangerous situation. The enraged Supremacy Chendi might launch a violent attack at any moment. The possibility of her resisting it was minuscule. However, she was still waiting for Lin Feng to arrive. Only if the two of them joined forces did they have a chance of contending against this Supremacy Chendi in front of her. 50 worlds. These were all worlds that belonged to Supremacy Chendi. Supremacy Chendi was incomparably furious. He wished he could kill Supremacy Fura on the spot. However, he still retained his rationality. Supremacy Fura could not die. At least for the time being, she could not die. He had to understand how Supremacy Fura had discovered this Kiliacosm domain. This was the most important thing. He could not let what happened today repeat itself. This Kiliacosm domain was his, and would always be his. Rumble. Hence, Supremacy Chendi manifested his worlds. He did not go all out. Just using more than 100 worlds was enough to crush Supremacy Fura. Over 100 worlds, comparable to a celestial devil king. Supremacy Fura's face was pale. She knew that she was in big trouble this time. Huge trouble. Someone with 100 worlds would be a hegemon no matter where they went. Suppress. Supremacy Chendi manifested his internal world and instantly crushed down. Another boundary stone. A smile appeared on Lin Feng's lips. This was already the 5th boundary stone he had obtained. Without hesitation, he was swept into his internal universe, where it was instantly devoured by the chaotic lotus. I've already obtained 78 worlds. Not bad. Lin Feng looked at the total of 78 worlds in the internal universe, and a trace of satisfaction appeared on his face. As the chaotic lotus devoured the 5th boundary stone, Lin Feng suddenly realized that the chaotic lotus was actually moving again. This is? Lin Feng saw 5 lotus seeds vaguely appear on the chaotic lotus. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, the 5 lotus seeds flew out of the chaotic lotus on their own. Then, they suddenly exploded violently, shaking the cosmos. Lin Feng's eyes widened, but he did not interfere, because he realized that there seemed to be some special changes after the explosion of the 5 lotus seeds. When the dust settled, Lin Feng's eyes widened. He could not quite believe the scene before him. Lin Feng was incomparably stunned. What was going on? The chaotic lotus had fused 5 boundary stones. He had thought that they could make the cosmic membrane stronger and space more stable, but he did not expect them to turn into 5 worlds. Could it be that letting the chaotic lotus devour the boundary stones can not only allow them to grow into worlds, but also stabilize the cosmic membrane? This is really killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Lin Feng quickly weighed the gains and losses. He realized that giving the boundary stones to the chaotic lotus to devour was not a loss at all. New worlds could still be born, and these new worlds were born in Lin Feng's internal universe. This also meant that they were completely compatible with Lin Feng's internal universe rules, and there was no need for the reincarnation realm to erase their imprints at all. Moreover, how daunting was it that the chaotic lotus could grow worlds on its own after devouring boundary stones. Although Lin Feng did not lack worlds now, this Kiliacosm domain ultimately had a limit. What if it reached its limit, and there were no more worlds to devour? However, boundary stones were different. Boundary stones could be traded. As long as one could pay a sufficient price, they could trade for boundary stones. Moreover, Lin Feng had a bold hypothesis. Now, 5 lowest-grade boundary stones could give rise to 5 worlds. What if the quality of boundary stones improved? Would the worlds born be comparable to 5, or even 10 or more ordinary worlds? Lin Feng did not know, but he just needed to obtain the high-quality boundary stone and give it a try. In the future, even if he did not encounter new Kiliacosm domains, Lin Feng did not have to worry that his internal universe could not grow. He could just use boundary stones. Lin Feng naturally knew the significance behind this. Currently, including these 5 worlds grown from the chaotic lotus, there were a total of 83 worlds in Lin Feng's internal universe. As for his combat power, it had reached the level of 119 worlds. Lin Feng was not afraid of even the 11th Celestial Devil King back then. Moreover, as long as he stayed in this Kiliacosm domain for a few more decades, he was confident that he could increase the number of worlds in his internal universe to more than 200. This speed of improvement was simply astonishing. Buzz. At this moment, Lin Feng received a message from Supremacy Fura. Lin Feng, Supremacy Lin Feng, we're in trouble. Someone unwelcome has arrived at this Kiliacosm domain. This was a message from Supremacy Fura. When Lin Feng saw it, his heart sank slightly. Someone unwelcome. Looks like another controller has discovered this Kiliacosm domain. Supremacy Fura is probably in danger. Lin Feng did not hesitate at all. An unprecedented power erupted from his internal universe, and the cosmic void shook violently. Then, he transformed into a stream of light and rushed in Supremacy Fura's direction. Rumble. As over 100 worlds of Supremacy Chendi crushed down, Supremacy Fura could not hold out anymore. She could only grit her teeth and hold out. She originally had 50 worlds. Now, she could only watch helplessly as the worlds in her body collapsed one after another. 1, 2, 3, 4. Back then, after staying in the dark domain Kiliakosm for so long, she had only managed to increase the number of her internal worlds to 5. But now she had lost 8 worlds in a short period of time. If not for the fact that she had obtained great benefits in this Kiliakosm domain, Supremacy Fura probably would not have been able to hold out, and would have fallen by now. However, Supremacy Fura was still gritting her teeth and holding out. Even though her 42 worlds were already dim and seemed about to collapse at any moment, she was holding out with all her might. She knew that Lin Feng was about to arrive. Tell me, how did you find this Kiliakosm domain? Seeing that Supremacy Fura was on the verge of collapse, and her internal worlds were in imminent danger, Supremacy Chendi suddenly asked her the question. The intention to threaten was all too obvious. Supremacy Chendi's 100 worlds floated beside him, as if they would descend at any moment. Supremacy Fura knew very well that if she did not say anything, Supremacy Chendi likely would not hold back anymore. Faced with the crushing force of 100 worlds, the remaining 42 worlds in her body that were already at their limit would probably collapse instantly. Do you really want to know? Suddenly, Supremacy Fula raised her head and said calmly, "Ha!" Supremacy Chendi raised his brows. Then, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body. His 300 worlds erupted instantly, pouring down like the Milky Way. Boom! The entire Kiliakosm domain seemed to be shaking. The collision between worlds emitted a terrifying shockwave that spread in all directions. There's an accomplice? Supremacy Chendi's eyes narrowed slightly. When the dust settled, he realized that Supremacy Fura had already disappeared. Just now, he had sensed a trace of threat intuitively, which was why the power in all his worlds had erupted. As expected, another controller had launched a sneak attack. Humph, you also suffered heavy losses from that strike just now. Let's see where you can run to. A sharp glint flashed across Supremacy Chendi's eyes. It turned out that another 2 people already knew about this Kiliakosm domain. He had to get rid of the 2 of them as soon as possible. Otherwise, it was very likely that a 3rd, 4th, and even countless people would know the secret of this Kiliakosm domain. He could not tolerate anyone encroaching on this Kiliakosm domain. Hence, these 2 people must be eliminated. Supremacy Lin Feng? Supremacy Fura, the enemy is too strong. We have to hurry up and escape. Lin Feng could no longer care about his own losses. In reality, that head-on clash just now had ended very poorly for him. Moreover, he had been launching a sneak attack and caught the enemy off guard. He lost 3 of his original 83 worlds in an instant, and was left with only 80 worlds. This was an unprecedented loss. Even though Lin Feng had used the secret technique to strengthen the cosmic membrane in advance, and even though his chaotic lotus had fused 5 boundary stones, the entire cosmic space had become incomparably stable. However, the difference was too great. Being able to save Supremacy Fura by force in front of the other party was already not easy. It was normal to endure some losses. Fortunately, these 3 lost worlds were all worlds transformed from the boundary stone. Even life forms had not been born in them. Could be considered a blessing amidst misfortune. Supremacy Fura also knew that the situation was very dire at this moment. She quickly introduced the other party's identity to Lin Feng. Supremacy Lin Feng. This person claims to be Supremacy Chendi, and possesses 100 worlds. 100 worlds? I'm afraid there's far more. He should have more than 300 worlds, and is slightly stronger than even Supremacy Autumn back then. Lin Feng immediately interrupted Supremacy Fura. 100 worlds? What a joke. Lin Feng himself had the combat power of 100 worlds, but 3 of his worlds were destroyed in a single strike. How could there be only 100 worlds? There were at least 300 worlds, even stronger than Supremacy Autumn back then. Among the controllers Lin Feng had met, apart from Supremacy Spring back then, Supremacy Summer and Supremacy Autumn were the strongest. Even now, Lin Feng was far from Supremacy Autumn's match, let alone Supremacy Chendi. An expert not inferior to Supremacy Autumn. Supremacy Fura muttered softly. She understood now. Previously, Supremacy Chendi had never intended to kill her from the beginning. He was clearly using her as bait to lure Lin Feng here. Not only was that Supremacy Chendi powerful, he was also very meticulous and terrifying. Supremacy Lin Feng, why did you come to save me despite knowing how dangerous it was? Supremacy Fura could not help but ask. She did not believe that, with Lin Feng's shrewdness, he would not know the other party's plan. Hey, you're my companion and comrade. Why wouldn't I save you? Moreover, even if I don't save you, do you think Supremacy Chendi won't be able to find me? This person has already considered this Kiliacosm domain his own. He won't let anyone off. Actually, there was something else Lin Feng had not said. If he wanted to escape, there was nothing Supremacy Chendi could do at all. After all, the spacetime imprint was far from something that Supremacy Chendi could break. However, if Lin Feng activated the spacetime imprint and escaped, Supremacy Fura would definitely die. After Lin Feng became a controller, he fought with the Celestial Devils countless times. Although his personality had gradually become indifferent, he still could not abandon his companions and escape alone. Hence, he had to save Supremacy Fura. Moreover, if Lin Feng was so selfish, it would be impossible for him to be invited to the Wonder Domain by Supremacy Fura, let alone encounter Supremacy Resplendence and find this nascent Kiliacosm domain. You can't escape. Lin Feng could only use the Void Quake secret technique with full force and escape continuously. Fortunately, as the worlds in his internal universe gradually increased, its power was far stronger than before and became very daunting. In the blink of an eye, he could leap an infinitely far distance. Even so, he still could not shake off Supremacy Chendi. If this continues, it will be very troublesome. Lin Feng frowned. If they could not shake off Supremacy Chendi, they could only keep fleeing like this. Although the power of a controller was infinite, and they were not afraid of exhausting it at all, if anything went wrong during this period of time and Supremacy Chendi caught up, it would be troublesome. Strength. I'm still not strong enough. Lin Feng urgently wanted to increase his strength. Facing an entity like Supremacy Chendi, to resist him head-on, Lin Feng would need the combat power of at least 200 worlds even if he had all kinds of advantages. Only then could Lin Feng rely on various methods to deal with Supremacy Chendi. However, how could the combat power of 200 worlds be so easy to attain? I need boundary stones, a large number of boundary stones. Supremacy Fura, do you have any boundary stones? Lin Feng asked Supremacy Fura directly. Boundary stones? Supremacy Fura frowned. However, she seemed to have thought of something, so she gritted her teeth and said, any kind of boundary stone will do? That's right. Both high-quality and low-quality boundary stones are fine. Of course, high-quality boundary stones would be better. The situation was urgent now, and Lin Feng did not have time to explain. I have a total of 11 boundary stones. Among them, 10 are low-quality boundary stones, and one can barely be considered a high-quality boundary stone. Hence, without any hesitation, Supremacy Fura took out 11 boundary stones and handed them to Lin Feng. These boundary stones. Lin Feng was incomparably surprised. Even if these boundary stones were of low quality, they could accommodate a few worlds, or even more than a dozen. They were of much higher quality than the boundary stones Lin Feng had obtained. As for that high-quality boundary stone, it was even more impressive. It could accommodate 100 worlds. If other controllers learned about such a high-quality boundary stone, they would definitely go insane. High-quality boundary stones that could accommodate 100 worlds were also very rare. The boundary stone in Supremacy Fura's body should be enough to accommodate 100 worlds. But she still had a high-quality boundary stone. This Supremacy Fura was not simple either. Supremacy Fura also gritted her teeth and explained, other than that high-quality boundary stone, these are all boundary stones I collected over the years. As for that high-quality boundary stone, I had a fortuitous encounter back then and obtained 2 such boundary stones. I used one to open up my internal universe. I originally planned to sell the other one in the future to exchange for some higher quality boundary stones. However, the situation is critical now. Since Supremacy Linfeng needs it, I'll naturally offer them all. Supremacy Fura had indeed had a fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, how could an ordinary life form of the Wonder World obtain such a powerful high-quality boundary stone? Chaotic Lotus, devour. Linfeng swept all 11 boundary stones into his internal universe, where they were devoured by the Chaotic Lotus. Buzz. Linfeng divided a portion of his consciousness and immersed himself in the internal universe. When the 11 boundary stones were swept into the internal universe, the Chaotic Lotus instantly went wild. Its roots pierced into the 11 boundary stones forcefully. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. The 10 low-quality boundary stones had already been pulverized and fused into the Chaotic Lotus. Only the high-quality boundary stone was left, but it did not seem to be much smaller. It was being absorbed by the Chaotic Lotus constantly. It seemed like it would take some time to completely fuse. During this period of time, the Chaotic Lotus produced many more lotus seeds. 1, 2, 3, 4. In a short period of time, 10 lotus seeds had already grown on the Chaotic Lotus. Bang, bang, bang. Then, the 10 lotus seeds exploded instantly. Terrifying rules were reconstructing the world. That's right, a world. Once these 10 lotus seeds exploded, they quickly began to condense into worlds. Moreover, they were incomparably majestic and massive, far exceeding ordinary worlds. 10 worlds. Moreover, each of these worlds is comparable to 3 ordinary worlds. This is equivalent to 30 worlds. Linfeng was shocked and incomparably awed deep down. Previously, he had only guessed that the lotus seed produced from a high-quality boundary stone after it was devoured by the Chaotic Lotus must be unusual. The world grown from the Chaotic Lotus should also be extraordinary. Of course, this was just Linfeng's previous speculation. It had never actually been verified. But now, Linfeng might as well have verified it. The higher the quality of the boundary stone, the stronger the world grown from its fusion with the Chaotic Lotus. It would far surpass ordinary worlds. For a moment, Linfeng's internal worlds increased explosively, and so did his strength. The number of his internal worlds had reached a total of 90, and there were a total of 28 worlds comparable to 3 worlds. In other words, in terms of overall combat power, Linfeng had already reached the combat power of 146 worlds. Unfortunately, 3 worlds had been destroyed by Supremacy Chindi previously. Otherwise, Linfeng would manage to have the combat power of 150 worlds now. It was only because Linfeng had transformed into a universe, and had no bottlenecks or restrictions in his internal universe, that his strength could increase so quickly. However, it was far from enough to deal with Supremacy Chindi. There's still one more boundary stone. Linfeng frowned. There was still one more boundary stone. It seemed to have been constantly absorbed by the Chaotic Lotus, but it had never completely fused into the Chaotic Lotus. This boundary stone could accommodate up to 100 worlds. It was considered a high-quality boundary stone. Linfeng also wanted to see how miraculous the world grown from this boundary stone would be. Hence, Linfeng fled in a frenzy. Supremacy Chindi, who was tracking him, suddenly felt that Linfeng's speed seemed to have increased again. Sometimes he would actually put some distance between them. Left with no choice, Supremacy Chindi could only activate his secret technique in a frenzy, trying to catch up to Linfeng as quickly as possible. As 1 month, 2 months, 3 months passed, after a total of 3 months, the boundary stone in Linfeng's internal universe finally disappeared. It was completely devoured by the Chaotic Lotus and pulverized. The Chaotic Lotus also bore a lotus seed, as expected. However, this lotus seed looked a little special. It looked like a colossus that was constantly growing. It was countless times larger than other ordinary lotus seeds. Moreover, its speed of growth was especially slow. In the blink of an eye, 9 months had passed. Finally, this lotus seed had reached its limit. Linfeng could already vaguely sense that this lotus seed was shaking. Once it exploded, the terrifying energy contained within could even shake the entire universe. Boom! Finally, the lotus seed exploded. The terrifying shockwaves spread in all directions, shaking the entire internal universe. Immediately, even Lin Feng's speed of escape was affected. He staggered and actually stopped. Lin Feng's expression changed. He wanted to escape again, but how could Supremacy Chendi miss this good opportunity? Hence, he rushed over in a frenzy as quickly as possible. Moreover, he mobilized the power of all 300 worlds, transforming them into a power that enveloped the entire void, enveloping Lin Feng firmly. Why don't you keep running? Supremacy Chendi was furious. He had pursued them for an entire year, before finally seizing an opportunity to catch up to these two petty thieves. In the eyes of Supremacy Chendi, Lin Feng and Supremacy Fura were petty thieves who had stolen the worlds that originally belonged to him. Supremacy Lin Feng. Supremacy Fura's expression was filled with wariness, but a trace of despair also appeared on her face. This was a terrifying entity not inferior to Supremacy Autumn. Once he caught up, they were goners. However, Lin Feng, who she had placed her hopes on, acted as if he did not hear her. He did not even take any measures. Instead, a look of surprise and joy appeared on his face. Lin Feng was indeed very pleasantly surprised now, because after the strange lotus seed exploded in his internal universe, a world was born. This world could be considered a colossal world. Even though Lin Feng had seen too many worlds, he had never seen such a world. Just the world aura alone could vaguely threaten Lin Feng. Was there ever such a gigantic world in a small kiliocosm? Lin Feng did not know, but he had only roughly estimated that this world was equivalent to at least 80 ordinary worlds. 80 ordinary worlds. Lin Feng found it hard to imagine what kind of thing a world comparable to 80 ordinary worlds was. According to the quality of the boundary stone, the capacity of this boundary stone appeared to be 100 worlds, but after being devoured by the chaotic lotus, the world grown was only comparable to 80 worlds. There seemed to be much less, but that should be some necessary consumption. The higher the quality of the boundary stone, the greater the consumption. However, on careful thought, Lin Feng realized that it did not seem to be as simple as exhausting 20 worlds. A boundary stone could grow a colossal world comparable to 80 worlds through the chaotic lotus. What did this mean? If he could obtain some one-star boundary stones in the future, would they be able to grow into colossal worlds comparable to thousands, or even tens of thousands of worlds? If that was really the case, how terrifying would it be? There was no such world in small kiliocosms, and it was impossible for there to be such worlds even in medium kiliocosms. Moreover, the colossal worlds were not just massive. How could such an enormous world operate? How could the rules be maintained? All these questions and more seemed to make them stand apart greatly from ordinary worlds. The matters involved were not as simple as exhausting dozens of worlds. However, by relying on this colossal world, Lin Feng quickly obtained the combat power of 226 worlds. Countless world phantoms floated above Lin Feng's head, resisting the pressure of 300 worlds from Supremacy Chendi. At this moment, Lin Feng felt as if he possessed infinite power. Even if he faced Supremacy Chendi head-on, he would no longer be afraid. Myriad origin integration. At this moment, Lin Feng was the universe, and the universe was Lin Feng. He could even vaguely sense the strengthening of the cosmic space. In particular, the countless roots of the chaotic lotus stretched in the void, making the cosmic space incomparably stable. The cosmic membrane also strengthened this instant. Infinite power was completely unleashed at this moment. Lin Feng had never felt so powerful as he did now. Moreover, this was a power that belonged to himself. Boom! There were no fancy tricks or elements of luck in the collision between worlds. There was only a competition of pure strength. Lin Feng felt his entire body shake, and his internal universe shook violently. However, no worlds were destroyed. Only tremors appeared in the space of the internal universe. Opposite him, the entire body of Supremacy Chendi shook despite carrying the power of 300 worlds. A trace of disbelief appeared on his face. They were evenly matched. In a head-on clash, the two of them were actually evenly matched. No, perhaps Lin Feng was still a little lacking and was at a disadvantage. The tremors of his internal universe were far stronger than his opponents, but the chaotic lotus stabilized the void. This little amount of tremor was nothing to Lin Feng's internal universe. Impossible, absolutely impossible. You only have dozens of worlds, not even 100. How can you contend with more than 300 worlds of mine? Supremacy Chendi's eyes widened in disbelief. He could see very clearly that there were only a few dozen worlds in Lin Feng's internal universe. In reality, Lin Feng's internal universe did only have a few dozen worlds. To be precise, there were 91 worlds, but every world was unique. In addition, his internal universe had been strengthened by secret techniques, the boundary stone, and the chaotic lotus, so it was naturally different from ordinary controllers. Although there were 91 worlds, he had the combat power of nearly 230 worlds, and could contend with Supremacy Chendi, who had combat power of 300 worlds. Nothing is impossible. Lin Feng's expression was very calm as he looked at Supremacy Chendi indifferently. From the looks of it, it was impossible for the other party to kill him. However, this was not enough. Far from enough. Supremacy Chendi would not give up so easily. If he did not scare off Supremacy Chendi, the other party would probably keep pestering him. As expected, Supremacy Chendi did not believe it. The over 300 worlds in his body suddenly erupted, smashing towards Lin Feng like a tsunami. Boom! Lin Feng also activated a total of 91 worlds in his internal universe, transforming it into a vast universe that collided fiercely with them. The violent shockwave of power spread in all directions. Even the gravity rules of this Kiliacosm domain were directly distorted by the terrifying shockwave. However, no matter how they collided, Lin Feng was safe and sound. His strongest aspect might not be his offensive power, but his defensive power. After being strengthened by the boundary stones, his cosmic membrane had been strengthened to a simply astonishing level. Lin Feng did not know what kind of power could tear his cosmic membrane apart. However, with such a tough cosmic membrane, there was no need to worry about his enemy tearing it apart. Thus, Lin Feng had a bold idea. Boom, boom, boom. However, it was still not a problem for Lin Feng to hold off Supremacy Chendi. After the collision, Lin Feng's internal universe instantly entangled Supremacy Chendi, preventing him from moving at all. At this moment, Lin Feng roared, "Big guy, attack! Gore!" A terrifying Kiliacosm beast instantly emerged from Lin Feng's internal universe. It opened its mouth and bit hard at Supremacy Chendi's cosmic membrane. Crack! The cosmic membrane was instantly ripped apart. A trace of excitement flickered in the eyes of the Kiliacosm beast called Big Guy. It opened its black hole-like mouth and devoured the worlds in the body of Supremacy Chendi in a frenzy. The Kiliacosm beasts devoured everything. Even worlds were food for the Kiliacosm beasts. Moreover, the Big Guy was a Kiliacosm beast that was still growing. Unlike Lin Feng, the Big Guy was not a controller. It could devour the internal universe of a controller at will. Hence, the Big Guy kept devouring worlds one after another. It was also growing rapidly. No. Supremacy Chendi was frightened. He never expected Lin Feng to have an aide, and it was a Kiliacosm beast with combat power comparable to dozens of worlds. Normally, forget about a maturing Kiliacosm beast. Even a mature Kiliacosm beast would not be a threat to Supremacy Chendi. However, he was entangled by Lin Feng's internal universe and could not move. If his cosmic membrane was torn apart by the Kiliacosm beast at this moment, his internal universe would suffer. Kiliacosm beasts could devour anything, even worlds. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. In the blink of an eye, Big Guy's body seemed to have expanded further. A good total of 30 worlds were gone from Supremacy Chendi's internal universe. Those were 30 worlds. In fact, after Big Guy had devoured them, Supremacy Chendi's number of internal worlds barely reached 300. Ano Yi's secret technique. Supremacy Chendi gritted his teeth and used some kind of secret technique. Immediately, a total of 20 worlds in his body exploded like supernovas. Terrifying fluctuations of power swept through the entire universe. Even though Lin Feng withdrew his universe immediately, he still sensed a violent impact shaking the universe. Fortunately, he retrieved the Kiliacosm beast into his internal universe immediately. Otherwise, even the Kiliacosm beast probably would not be able to withstand this strike. Swoosh! Supremacy Chendi transformed into a stream of light and fled. He had used his secret technique just to escape. Supremacy Lin Feng. If he encountered Lin Feng again, the one who would definitely be crushed would be Supreme Chendi. However, Lin Feng also knew very well that it was almost impossible for him to kill Supremacy Chendi. It was impossible to kill an expert at the level of Supremacy Chendi, unless they were absolutely overwhelmed by power that was several dozens of times their strength.